Shalom, everyone, and welcome back to the Rabbi Avi Show. You know, they say that if you want to see the future of the Jewish people, you shouldn't look at a spreadsheet of statistics. You should look at who is sitting around your Shabbos table. Last week, something happened that I can only describe as divine providence. It was a last-minute series of events that brought 4 incredible young people into my home here in Tucson. We had Shoshana Levine, a second-year rabbinical student at JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary, who I've known since her undergrad days. Her partner, Jacob Sandler, a cantor, a chazan, serving at North Suburban Synagogue, Bethel, in Illinois. And a couple I met just moments before dinner at shul, Ed Gelernt, a PhD student at Stanford, and his wife, Aleeza Schoenberg, a writer and Jewish communal leader. What started as a quiet Friday night dinner turned into a high-volume, high-energy debate that lasted well into the night. We weren't just making small talk, and by the way, we had a lot of beautiful singing around the table as well. We were wrestling with the soul of American Judaism in our day in 2026. In this episode, you're going to hear that conversation. We dive into the slippery slope. How do we maintain standards without alienating the very people we're trying to reach? You'll hear Aleeza speak powerfully about her transition from modern orthodoxy to egalitarianism, searching for a space where her presence as a woman didn't just exist, but truly mattered. We touch on some heavy themes today. The 5th child. We all know the 4 children from the Haggadah, but what about the one who didn't even show up to the Seder? How do we find the disengaged in a world of endless choices? The LARP. Ed brings up a provocative idea. Are we just live-action role-playing as ancient Judeans? Or are we a living, breathing civilization? The price of admission. We discuss the economics of Judaism and how we break down the barriers of expensive suburban memberships to make shul feel like a home. But most importantly, we talk about ownership. You'll hear how these 4 aren't just consumers of Judaism. They are builders. Whether it's Ed and Aleeza's Mishmar group in Palo Alto or Shoshana and Jacob's path toward clergy, they are proof that the thinning of the herd isn't a foregone conclusion. As Tal Becker is quoted as saying, the essence of what it is to be a Jew is to be engaged in the question of what it is to be a Jew. So whether you're the wise child, the contrary child, or the 5th child who hasn't stepped into a synagogue in years, pull up a chair. There's a seat for you at this table.
My name is Ed Gelernt. As Rabbi Avi mentioned, I am living in Palo Alto. I'm a graduate student at Stanford in a PhD program studying genetics. Specifically, I'm focused on stem cells in the brain. And in addition to being in biosciences, I also am a member at Kolamet, a conservative synagogue in Palo Alto. Before that, I was a member at Temple Beth Shalom in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And before that, I typically attended the South Philadelphia Shtiebel when I was living there. My background is as a conservative Jew. I grew up going to day school. And in college, I had the privilege of singing with Magevet, which is the a cappella Jewish choir at Yale University, where I got to travel around the country and around the world, singing for and interacting with and learning about different Jewish communities all over the place.
Wow. Aleeza?
I'm Aleeza Schoenberg, changing it to Gelernt soon. And I'm originally from the Boston area. Grew up as a modern Orthodox Jew there, went to Jewish day school there for 13 years. And then I studied in Israel for a year. Have always been really involved in Jewish life. I was very involved in college. I moved more towards egalitarianism towards the end of college and have been involved with egalitarian Jewish life, a lot professionally. I worked at a shul, Reform shul, and I worked for Hadar. I now work for the Israel Studies program at Stanford, so kind of a mix of different Jewish experiences there. Grew up with Jewish summer camp. Like Ed, I'm now a member of Kolamet in Palo Alto. And
aren't you even on their board? Is that correct?
I am on their board. I am the token young person on the board. And very involved in young adult Jewish life there in general. And also, I'm a writer, so I do a lot of writing. I write a lot of what I know, fiction, but I've done a lot of writing about Judaism, and I think about what Judaism means to me, what it means to young people in my writing.
Excellent.
You also worked for Harvard Hillel.
I did work for Harvard Hillel, that's true. I worked for Hillel.
That's a lot of different experiences that you bring to the table. Thank you so much, Aleeza. Let's hear from Jacob.
Hi, my name is Jacob Sandler. I am the Chazan in Highland Park, Illinois at North Suburban Synagogue Bethel for short. Let's see, I originally am from the New York suburbs, Rockland County for those that know it, and an alum of Ramah Berkshires where I got the nickname Milk, so if you're listening to this and you know that name, hey, shout out to you. My expertise is really as a cantor. I'm part of the Cantors Assembly. I studied at JTS, graduated in 2021 from there, got a music ed degree before that I'm only using tangentially because every clergy's an educator. And I love singing and doing all sorts of musical things. You know, as we approach this conversation, I think it's worth noting that I've had the privilege of a lot of interdenominational and non-denominational spaces, especially around Jewish music, where we kind of unite across those sorts of differences. The first time I knew I wanted to be a cantor was actually at Havana Shira, which is very much like Reform, but all my college Jewish experiences were at Chabad. And all of that kind of just kept me wanting to stay in the movement I knew and loved. I went to conservative synagogue. I went to public school and Camp Ramah, as I said. And, I like the tradition and change, the modern and old school combo. I think there's such beauty in that, and that animates me and keeps me engaged in Jewish life. And I'm so excited to be here in Tucson with Rabbi Avi. I'm so grateful to Shoshana for bringing me down here. It was very last minute, and boy, has it been worth all of the logistics involved. I can't wait to come back.
We're having a lot of fun.
We'll be on the record about that. This has been fabulous.
Shoshana.
I'm Shoshana Levine. I am a second year in rabbinical school at the Jewish Theological Seminary. I know Rabbi Avi from when I was an undergrad at the University of Arizona, and I double majored in Judaic studies and sports and society. I just love, being Jewish, and I love egalitarian Judaism. I attend Hadar for shul when I'm in New York City. But also, it's a great space to be an egalitarian Jew, and I really find my Judaism to be an important part of my life. I did day school and Camp Ramah and grew up going to shul every week, and I really defined my childhood as being Zocheret Shabbat and not Shomeret Shabbat. So we were doing Shabbat dinner every week. We went to shul every week, but we'd go shopping after. We'd have a soccer game after. We weren't, observant of the halachot, but we really cared about setting aside time for Shabbos. And I think for me, I've wanted to be a rabbi since I was 9. And so this is kind of a fulfillment of that dream. And it's been a long time coming. I'm very excited, and I love being back in Tucson and being in this community at Beit Shalom with Rabbi Avi and with all of the members of Beit Shalom. So it's really exciting and fortuitous that we were able to come for Shabbos and stay and do this podcast.
It's a blessing, as I've said. So I want to hear from all of you. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. It's a great opportunity to talk about what has been happening for years now in America when it comes to the Jewish scene. American Jewry, and what do we think about the future, and how do the various streams respond adequately and perhaps not adequately enough to make a difference in the lives of American Jewry? I guess I'm first curious about Aleeza, because Aleeza, you grew up modern Orthodox and you've kind of modified that. So why don't you tell us about that? What was problematic for you in that world, and what were you looking for?
It's an interesting question. I try to avoid the word problematic, actually.
Or challenging, perhaps.
Yeah, what's interesting is, at the moment, my narrative is much more about what worked for me elsewhere, what was going to be the path for me to pursue authenticity, basically, and figure out who I am and what I want and what I need, and live a life that felt really fulfilling. There were a series of events and conversations that I could spend hours talking about.
Sure.
But I think a couple of anecdotes I could talk about one was, there was a women's service that we had in my Orthodox community in college, and I remember for some reason, we're doing the service on the men's side of the mechitza. It didn't make a difference which side. And I remember sitting there. I'm not someone who leads much, but I love being a part of communities. I love being involved. And sitting on the men's side felt weird and wrong, but also exhilarating. Like I was part of something in a way I hadn't experienced before, as if my presence really mattered in that moment. And I knew my presence mattered in so many ways. I'm on the board of a shul. That's different from leading, and women can do that in Orthodox communities. But it felt so much more real for me. And then another story is that a friend of mine asked me why I was Orthodox. And the reasons I gave had to do with a lot of things. What I wanted for my children, what I wanted in terms of being able to feel like I'm part of a community that is devoted and doing the same things that I'm doing and aligned with me. And I realized that a lot of what I wanted, both in terms of community and for my children, had changed, but also that starting to be egalitarian as a young person who was single at the time, didn't actually contradict any of the things I had even wanted before. And so I started exploring egalitarian Judaism, and I realized there are strong communities, and I felt like I could be myself in a way that I couldn't before. I'm someone who's drawn to new experiences, and food is one of those. So changing my dietary practices made a difference. Changing the way I dressed made a difference. Being able to explore what my body means to me, basically, through clothing. And I could do that in the Orthodox community, but there was much more room to do that with other people in an egalitarian community. And then there were just a lot of, I've learned a lot of halacha, a lot of Gemara, a lot of Torah, and there were conclusions in Orthodoxy that I just didn't agree with. I tracked the logic and I came to a different conclusion. So again, I didn't feel authentic doing something that didn't align with what I believed and needed.
Talk a lot about community, and you said that there are egalitarian communities. It sounds like that there are vibrant egalitarian communities. I'm curious where those communities are.
This is something Ed and I talk about a lot. We love our community in Palo Alto. But as we think about what we want for ourselves Jewishly, it definitely is a question because they are hard to find, and it's hard to find people who are aligned with you. The more choice you have, the more variance there is,
Right.
and the fewer people there are who are doing the same thing as you. So, I mean, I could list communities I know of, but at the end of the day, it's definitely hard to find, but it exists, and you can find people who you really like and who care about similar things as you. But I'm not going to say we've figured it out.
The phrase that is coming to my mind right now when it comes to people making choices and figuring things out, and I'm sure you've all heard this quite a bit, is slippery slope.
Oh, man.
So how do we deal with a slippery slope in that? Because we're like in a more strict community where people are watching you and, in a sense, judging you for your practices. It kind of tightens up what the choices. But when people are exploring and figuring out, and what you're exploring kind of and you're figuring out, like you said, it's not necessarily what your neighbor's doing, or if you even have a Jewish neighbor. So those are all tough distinctions, I would say.
Yeah, I have thought about this a fair bit in terms of my own relationship to hashkafa and halacha as it pertains not just to any given community's practice, but my own individually, as any individual's practice will vary within a community.
For our listeners, hashkafa is really your outlook, your philosophy, and halacha is the application of Jewish law.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm somebody who has sort of vacillated a bit in what would be technically looked at as different spaces. I mentioned that I attended the Shtiebel in South Philadelphia, which is actually a modern Orthodox synagogue. It's about as egalitarian as I think Orthodox spaces come, but is, strictly speaking, in the Orthodox movement. As Aleeza and I mentioned, we attend a conservative shul in Palo Alto that we love. I've been part of a community in Cambridge, Massachusetts that is typically more in the sort of halachic egalitarian or traditional egalitarian space. So a lot of people there who are strictly Shomer Shabbat, many of whom are quite strict about being Shomer Kashrut as well. This is a long-winded way of sort of getting to your question around what constitutes a slippery slope, coming from a breadth of different experiences, which is to say, I don't know that I've found myself feeling like I'm on a slippery slope, in part because I'm not necessarily looking for excuses to be made. And I can't speak for anyone else, but certainly the friends that I've had and had conversations with, I don't think are necessarily trying to figure out how to retrofit Judaism to fit the most convenient, frictionless life possible. The conversations and considerations I've mostly been a part of and have seen are more around what constitutes a meaningful Jewish life, perhaps, and what makes sense or doesn't make sense in today's world. I mean, we live in an unbelievably anachronistic tradition, right, where we are, the way I like to describe it is we are LARPing as ancient Judeans from 3,000 years ago in modern day America, and certainly different denominations have different approaches to this, but I think every individual has a different approach to this. Yeah, I could talk more about.
What do you mean that we are LARPing as ancient Judeans? Explain
when we think about the Torah and we think about halacha, right, Jewish law, the word religion and the notion of religion is a modern idea.
Yeah, like the Emancipation, where like Judaism wasn't necessarily just a religion until we suddenly were allowed to be part of the societies we were living in the diaspora. So our Judaism became our religion, and we could actually be like German or French or Spanish. So in a lot of ways, like being Jewish wasn't just about religion. For like centuries before that, it was as if we were like, like immigrants from another country living in another place. These just didn't have one to go back to at the time, per se.
We didn't have rights, and I strongly disagree. I don't look at us as a religion at all, but I think that part of our people decided to play that game and to package our our situation that way and say, oh, we are of the, we're Hebrew, of the Jewish faith, of the Hebrew persuasion, and we're good German citizens or French citizens or whoever we are. But to me, we're part of Klal Yisrael. We're a nation, a civilization. It's much deeper than that. But part of that's part of the challenge is how do we define ourselves? And you all are so bought in, and you're like working on the nuances of like how you express yourself. But it seems like a given that you want to be Jewish. And I kind of want to start. I mean, we've heard some very deep. And Shoshana, you said since you were 9 years old, you want to be a rabbi. You don't want to be a rabbi unless you want to be Jewish. So first, I mean, why is it that you all want to? You live in a country where you don't have to identify as Jewish. I mean, I can say, oh, according to halakha, you are Jewish whether you like it or not. But the bottom line is, you all choose to be Jewish, and you don't have to. Perhaps. I don't know, the anti-Semites would disagree, but you don't have to necessarily choose to be Jewish. And we see a lot of our brothers and sisters who are kind of falling through the cracks, and you're not falling through the cracks. You all went to synagogue because you wanted to, and I gotta say, it's very strange that Ed and Aleeza, particularly, we can account for Shoshana and Jacob because they're in this whole clergy tract. But we have these Jewish people who are on vacation in Arizona, and they're davka coming to synagogue somewhere, like trying to have some Shabbat in your experience. And you're like bringing your Judaism to your experience. Why be Jewish?
We actually rearranged some of our trip in order to be able to be somewhere where we'd be able to spend Shabbat. We were originally going to be in Bisbee, and we're like, oh, we'll just switch around the days so that we can see the Jewish community and be part of that.
Why?
It's an interesting question. I think it's not a new take for me to say that young people are in Gen Z in particular are turning toward religion and traditionalism in a way that previous generations have moved away from. So I can offer my speculations on why that is as one person who's a part of it, but I'm sure there are smarter people than me who might have better takes on that. From my own vantage point, I mean, simply put, I've spent weekends more or less by myself in my adult life, post-college, just kind of not a lot to do before I got reaffiliated with going to Shul. And you can try to cobble together a social life or something that feels like a community. And those things exist outside of Jewish life or Christian life or Muslim life or whatever faith community you might belong to. But it is a wonderful relief in a kind of existential way to know that there is a place that you can show up to where there are people who, even if it's not the exact same people every time, some collection of the same people will reliably be there and will welcome you and will participate in a shared practice together. The questions around what those shared practices are.
So you stepped away from the community for a time bit, and then you realized that you wanted to come back. You wanted to step back into that, and so you realized the value. So for you, it sounds like a lot of the calculus is the value of community.
Yeah, I think that's where it starts for me, and then from there, actually building out meaning in the practices themselves has been some sort of ongoing work and exploration that I've tried to get others onto my team for.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, like, what Ed was saying, it's community. I grew up going to a minyan that was pretty lay-led and, like, very encouraging a lot of families with either teens or, like, becoming empty nesters, but also families with, like, younger kids. My peers that I went to school with were the same people that, like, went to my shul. They were connected. And so on Shabbos, I would, like, get to see people that I really like to see, and they encouraged me to start taking on leadership roles from a very young age. Like, oh, you go to day school, you know how to do ashrei? Like, come up here, do ashrei with me. I'm, like, 65 years old, why not? And I think, like, having that community and, like, fostering my sort of, like, eagerness to be involved and to lead, it really it sparked something in me. And I know like the clergy that I first looked up to was my cantor, who was like a woman and like the first like female clergy that I had a relationship with. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a cantor. Like I like singing. And then I was like, like I do like singing, but I like the rabbinic aspect, I think, more like the idea of, teaching, of looking at the Parsha and creating a Dvar Torah and doing all that stuff. And I loved my like Hebrew and Judaics classes. And so like quickly changed my tune and started saying I'm going to become a rabbi. And I've pretty much stuck to that. I had a little vignette in a sports career and then realized it's really hard to be Shomer Shabbos and work in that world, and sort of pivoted away from that and I realized that it's time for me to apply to rabbinical school and really like step into this sort of path that I feel very called to, and that I also feel very connected to and like I find very fulfilling from the rabbinic work that I've done so far. But it really boils down to community. I think that the Jewish community is really special.
There's two through lines that I'm noticing, and I haven't actually shared my own piece here, but it'll come through. One is, I think that one of the best ways to realize you care about Jewish life, because that's not a given. I think there's a lot of Jews out there that like would be perfectly happy to just not. I mean, I don't want to like disparage anyone, but I have some people in my own family who are like, I don't want to go to shul. And I'm like, but I'm davening, and they don't care. It doesn't actually make it less boring for them. I think it should, and my congregants think it does, but they don't. And that's okay. But I think that one of the like key ingredients of choosing Jewish life actually is counterintuitively when you sort of step away from it and realize you can't take it for granted, or that one can't take it for granted.
So is that the, if you will, kind of the leaving Egypt almost?
Yeah, or actually, so my friend Jackson Mercer, who I'm name dropping a little, he's a rabbi out of Hebrew College, and he had a song that he wrote called Lech Lecha, and he had this gorgeous line in the song that was like, I don't remember the first part of the verse, but I remember the second part was stepping off the path for a different view, that by taking a step away from it, you actually can look at it and realize how beautiful it is. When you're in it, you can either get used to it, numb to it, whatever, but when you step away, one can realize the beauty in it, and that's like the beauty of the Lech Lecha, or the leaving Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. And so I never thought I was going to be a cantor, and I resisted it well into the first semester of cantorial school. I thought I was going to be like a Jewish educator and like be a music teacher at like a Gann Academy or a Schechter or a Rochelle Zell in Chicago, or like something like that, Heschel, wherever, all the good, Milken. I just want to name all the regions. I'm going to name all the schools. But I went to college, and my mom tried really hard to send me to a school that had Jews, because otherwise, who was I going to date? And I ended up at the wrong campus in Buffalo for the Jewish community reasons, but the right one for music school. And when all of a sudden I couldn't take Jewish community for granted the way I could in Rockland County, where the 7-Eleven 2 minutes away in Muncie had kosher vending machines, and like substitute teachers would comment on like, everybody here is like Jewish, and which wasn't true, but a lot of us were, and mostly Reform and not particularly observant. But I was in a very Jewy community where my non-Jewish friends knew about like Seders and even I think they knew about Sukkot, like they knew things, because it was just in the air. And when I went to college and suddenly, first of all, made all my non-Jewish friends basically come from that time of my life, but also I realized how important it was to me when I was teaching other people about it, when I was forced to make the active choice to participate. So one of those through lines is when you get away from it, even if that's not even all the way away from like Judaism, but just away from what you're used to, I think there's a homecoming that is very compelling. If you want to like get Jews to want to be Jewish, like figure out what part of it actually was home. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, the other thing that I felt was like sort of a through line from Shoshana's story in particular is when people are empowered, they're invested. And I think that I noticed that she mentioned like the minyan that made you want to be a rabbi was very lay-led, and that there were a lot of opportunities for you to lead. And I actually grew up in a synagogue that didn't get a cantor till after my bar mitzvah. And I didn't really know about the cantor, and I didn't have any opinions on the cantor, and it wasn't something that I knew was even a job I could want to do. My Hebrew school friends saw that I was pretty quick at the language, thought, you should be a rabbi. And I'm like, ugh, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I'll date one maybe, but I don't want to be one. I'm kidding. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I had such high standards for clergy that made me nervous as someone who didn't grow up kosher or Shomer Shabbos. But because there wasn't a cantor, every time I came to shul after my bar mitzvah, someone would come up to me, oh, Jacob, you're here. Do you want to do Musaf? Do you want to do Shacharit? And I got used to davening, and I was like, sure, anything at that age, anything for attention, that's still true. But
how do you do that? And here you're in a very prestigious synagogue for chazanim, for cantors.
Yeah.
And how do you still foster that for people? It's almost a side conversation there, but I think it's really
I think it's important
to this conversation. It's apropos because are there going to be other people in the next generation that are going to have those opportunities, or are we as cantors kind of ball hogs in the synagogue?
That's something that I'm very cognizant of. I have a great, very much exceptional, and I don't want it to go to his head, but I have a really great bar mitzvah student this coming Shabbos. So if he hears this, he'll know who he is. He goes to Schechter and Ramah, and he's like into it. Like he comes to shul every week. Like this
Great kid.
He's a great kid. He's been such a fun student, and this is the kid who came in with a plan, and he said, "I want to learn Kabbalat Shabbat and Shacharit and Torah service and 3 Torah readings and the Torah readings at Mincha and Mincha." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you're making me look like I didn't do much at my bar mitzvah." I'm super excited, and he knows all his stuff, and he's Havdalah and everything. He's doing great because he's so motivated. So I mean, there's fun exceptions like that, but when you meet a kid who has a knack or an interest, it's so important to cultivate it. And I talked to my rabbi clergy partners at the shul, and I get that there's a balancing act of like, well, the synagogue, we hired you, we want to hear you daven. And like, and great. And most weeks, you totally will.
I got to jump in and just say here at Beit Shalom, it's and for our listeners who have no idea what Beit Shalom is like, Beit Shalom is independent. It's a very unique place. It's always been a place that was lay-led. And so when you throw a spiritual leader into that mix, it could have gone a different direction, but I've chosen to keep it in that direction. I try to do as little as possible. I'm more like the orchestrator or the conductor of the orchestra.
CEO.
The facilitator,
the facilitator, but I'm plugging people in. I'll speak like, maybe once a month on Shabbat, and it's all other people. The thing is, we do have lots of rabbis in our congregation, most of whom are just attendees and what we call Bet Shalomers, because we're Bet Shalom. What I'm going for is a very traditional, extremely traditional feel. You might want to call it. I don't like any of the labels, but
it's very Hamish.
It is Hamish.
Thank you. It's very Hamish, very home style, but also very down and just very welcoming and loving. Not cutting any corners. You might want to call it even a modern Orthodox experience, but at the same time, I've worked very hard to make it a place where any female is able to participate fully. And I do think that there's a space for that within our halachic system. And also, I guess the radical difference that we have, and you didn't see it this Shabbat, but we have many times children under the age of bar and bat mitzvah in leadership. It's like somebody's davening Musaf or Shacharit or reading Torah. That's kind of the radical thing that I've done. But the thing that I'm most pleased with is that we have people from the Orthodox world. We have people from conservative, Reconstructionist, renewal, reform, and Sephardic, all who feel comfortable here, and not just anyone in those, but some very important people in those worlds. Obviously, it's discouraging for some people, and they're, it's kind of outside of the realm that they could even see themselves comfortable in an environment without a mechitza, where women are reading from the Torah, etc. But you'd be surprised that many people realize that it's really not, in our culture, in American culture, it doesn't need to be a halachic problem for us, because we're, if my doctors are female, why can't, does it embarrass me to hear a female chanting from the Torah? Absolutely not. So, I mean, I'm not embarrassed in the professional world to trust the opinion of female scientists, female experts in all different fields. At the same time, part of the challenge, and this is a whole other episode probably, is how do you invite women and girls into the mix without emasculating the men and making it too feminine for people to want to participate? Because what we're really talking about today is how do we, what can we do to keep American Jews engaged?
I'm just thinking about something about the more women are in leadership in Christianity, the more Christianity ends up female dominated. So it's an interesting point you bring up, and I hadn't really thought about it in the context of Judaism, because so many of the people I know trying to really emphasize egalitarianism in Judaism are men. We were talking about this a little bit last night in terms of the prayer changes people make, and whether people add the imahot, the mothers, in addition to the fathers, and a lot of blessings. And there's no data on this, so we don't know if men do this more, but there is some amount of men trying to change things for women, women trying to take things for themselves, not in a bad way, just in a women can way. Take things for themselves. Men can't take things for women they can only give them. But I haven't heard men saying it feels too feminine.
Well, they don't say it. What they do is they go and play golf. They don't have to say it. They just don't come. They're just like, and that's what the people who call themselves Orthodox have an advantage in that realm, is that they have a very male-oriented space where men feel like it's a manly thing to sing. It's a man, and nobody thinks that it's a manly thing to sing. Like in the general, in the wide,
like few, men,
except for you all, right? I mean, these people are all four of my guests today, and the men and the women are incredible singers. We were really, singing so many zmirot around the table, and then we heard Ed led us in Shacharit earlier today on Shabbat. We're recording Motzei Shabbat, and Jacob led us in Musaf. They were both fantastic. So it is masculine to sing, but a lot of people in the wider culture don't think that it is masculine to sing. And so if it's going to be a male thing to sing, then I mean that's how they do it in the quote unquote Orthodox world, is that you see only men are allowed to do this.
My choir in high school was so overwhelmingly women. There were only 9 guys my senior year that they said, we can't do this. We're gonna have a women's choir for the 100 women, and we're gonna have like a weird barbershop not octet with an extra bass. And I always felt like, and this is like me and my own whatever journey, and it's like not even a big deal in 2026 as much as it probably used to be. But in my head it was like, yeah, it's effeminate, but like I never got into those masculine, in air quotes, things like sports and cars and what. I was like, let me be a tent-dwelling Jacob-esque kind of, let me do those. So it's just funny. Like I got to cantorial school, like, yeah, this is kind of like a more female, feminine thing. And only when I got there was it like, no, then I'm like, really?
It used to be only men.
It used to be all men.
That shows your age right there.
Right, I know.
It took longer for women to like be accepted into the cantorate than in the rabbinate at JTS. Like in the 90s, women weren't in the cantorial school, but women had been in the rabbinical school for like 10 years.
Right.
Yeah. And Kalisha probably made that difficult.
I think it's more, and part of that, it's more of a. It's become more of a challenge, or it was more of a challenge in the conservative movement, halachically, to have a female shlichat tzibur, emissary of the congregation. And so that's how they were going through that whole process. And that's part of what we were talking about, is like the movement's going through their process. And like, we need to make these decisions, and this will fix things. And it feels like, without being too disparaging right now, it feels often to me that those in the ivory towers are I don't know if it's for their egos or best case scenario, they really think that they're helping, I feel like they're chasing the tail and they're trying to react to what's going on. And oh my goodness, and part of the statistic that we've seen, and hopefully it's changed since October 7th in 2023, is that, 72% or whatever it is of American Jews outside of the Orthodox world are finding non-Jewish partners in marriage.
I think we can come back to the intermarriage point
If we want to.
if we so choose. But I think there's this through line that I'm picking up on that I think is really it moves me a lot, which is we're talking about the building of a community at the same time that we're talking about our kind of like personal journeys and the vision that you have for Bet Shalom in terms of the sort of the place that you're trying to build. Aleeza talked about her process in exploration and moving towards something, and Jacob talked about his concerns about religiosity in terms of being part of the clergy. We talked about the importance of community, and I think something that is important to note, and I've seen various writers on the internet comment on this when they talk about young people trying to just sort of create communities out of thin air. You can't build a community around nothing. That doesn't actually work. You can't just bring people together.
So how do you build a community?
So I think this is where Judaism as an ethos does a really good job. I think community, people end up hanging together, and they hang with things, period, in pursuit of something, in feelings of momentum, in sort of arcs toward something that we feel like we are achieving, even in small bits as we move. I think you see communities that die, people start to turn on each other, and my understanding is the impulse that people have toward content or goals or whatever ends up, as they lose sight of those goals, ends up just sort of turning on each other, and they're sort of like making progress on understanding, quote, where the problems are, which end up being each other, and the community auto-cannibalizes. I think a lot about communities of purpose. That's a phrase that I like a lot, that I started thinking about a few years ago. We are currently sitting in a Beit Midrash surrounded by bookshelves full of ink that has been spilled through thousands of years on the Jewish project. If you are someone who wants to show up to any Jewish space, no matter your level of fluency or facility, there is something you can grab to learn more and to think about anew. There is someone you can partner with to try to understand something new, to build something new. We talk about grappling with denominations, and there are a lot of people who are finding themselves in between denominations, trying to build something new. I think part of what makes Judaism culturally so appealing, at least to me, is that you can show up with just about any question you want. We have stories in the Talmud of rabbis who stopped believing in God and who openly flouted God, and they have made it into our corpus of works that are read time immemorial. You can show up with any grievance, any question. You can say pretty much anything, and you can be welcomed into the community, and you can start pushing on or building toward whatever it is you need. And that is, I think, something that is so sustenant to communities. And as sort of a note on this, when I hear people seriously, I think in jest, people make jokes about one another and about different denominations. When I hear people very seriously upset with this or that denomination or this or that practice because, well, they're not doing Judaism the right way. These are people who are engaged in the question of what it is to be a Jew, which I once heard Tal Becker, I believe, at the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem say is the essence of what it is to be a Jew, is to be engaged in the question of what it is to be a Jew. Mm-hmm. And so
those are all beautiful things, but how do you build community?
I think I think like the best way to build community is to seek it. And I know that's like a sort of like circular logic, or like on the other hand, like if you build it they will come is kind of true. Like yeah. I love organizations like Moishe House, like Beast, that really are meant to be post-denominational spaces. And like I'm so grateful that I live in New York City right now because of the Jewish community there and because of how diverse it is.
It's
and because
not because of the mayor?
I was like, don't
I'm
touch
not
it.
talking about
Don't
that.
touch it.
We don't want to talk about that.
We don't talk about Zora. I think the word that you're hoping someone will say, and if you're not, I am,
Okay.
is standard. There's got to be a standard, so to speak.
I wasn't hoping for that.
No, all right, so that's fine. I actually
disagree.
No, well,
I
here's
disagree as well.
good.
Yeah,
No, great. No, I'm glad you do, because there's two thoughts in my head and they contradict each other. And one of them is, remember the old Reese's peanut butter cup commercials? There's no wrong way to eat a Reese's, and someone would like dive off of a diving board. I'm the one in the 30s, so maybe this is dating myself as a millennial, but I used to say that in high school, like, there's no wrong way to eat a Judaism. Like, whatever you do is fine. But I'm thinking about your slippery slope question and how that does or doesn't kind of dovetail with meeting people where they are and that value. And, like, so on the one hand, like, I don't think there's a wrong way to be Jewish, except
all the people that disagree.
Well,
with you.
except like whatever it was that turned into Christianity, like that doesn't, you know what I mean? Like there is a line somewhere.
So everything else is good except for that.
Maybe not, right? But I would say like I would draw the line at like Jews for Jesus or not. I wouldn't count them among like Klal Yisrael as Jews. And if that gets me canceled, honestly, I thought it'd be worse. So, like, you know what I mean? But, like, so there are red lines. And so when I say standards, I don't mean, like, if you don't keep kosher, get out of here. I don't mean that.
What do you mean?
I mean that, well, here's what I mean. I mean
standard,
that,
like, no Jesus, period.
right, like, well, or
what else?
or
The bar
he
is
was-
on the floor.
The bar is on the floor, right? No, but I mean that, like, I think one of the challenges we see in the conservative movement, a movement that, like I said, I chose it because I love it, and I think it has this wonderful claim to like authentic Jewish practice as defined by there's a way that we do things and there's a system by which we change things. And even though we move slower than dirt, like, or molasses or something that actually moves.
Or what's it called? Pitch. Like it's technically a liquid, but it takes like 10 years to...
Exactly. We move so slowly on things, but I love that because it means that we care enough to change for the right reasons or by the way of the right process. And I feel really silly saying that because, of course, I also work at a synagogue that's like got a million committees. And sometimes I'm like, can't we just do the thing? And no, we got to do it through the process. So, like, I recognize as a human being the frustrating part of that. But I think that, like, I mean, this is also an issue that they have, like, in Israeli society, right? That they don't really have, like, a constitution, like a Declaration of Independence. Or this came up in an American cultural, whatever class, I don't remember when. But, like, what actually keeps Americans feeling together in their Americanness? And in this day and age, I would say very little, actually. Like, you know, there's regional issues, there's political divide. Like, I actually think it's so polarized.
I think the answer to that question is you have to go to another country. When Americans go to another country, then they feel American.
Which is,
when they're in America, they don't feel American.
But I think it goes back to the other point, though.
Yeah,
like, getting away from it is how you realize what it is and what you liked about it.
Yeah.
I think precisely the reason for this, and I can try to sort of make what I was saying before a bit more concise in response to your question, is that when you step away, you see what the things are that are actually like forward moving and aspirational that you just sort of started to take for granted as things stopped changing in the American gridlocked political system. I think the answer to your... Well, no, I shouldn't say the answer to your question. That's insanely like high-minded. But one way that I have thought to try to answer the question of how do you build community is very simply, and this might sound tautological, just build it. Just start.
If you build it, they will come.
Something.
If you have an idea, do that idea.
Okay.
Try it and see who comes to it. I think that one of the things that we've seen in American politics is that running on nothing doesn't work. You can't hold a coalition together on nothing, just like you can't hold a community together on nothing. You need some kind of positive vision of the future.
And I feel like
is that different than a standard?
Oh, I think it's more organic than a standard. Organic might be the wrong word, but there's a difference between trying to keep a community alive and building one. Yeah. And when you're putting together a community, sure, you're going to go to some kind of standard because you're trying to bring people together. And how are you going to find the other people who are like-minded? There's probably some standard you all have in common. But not necessarily. If you have a vision, hey, this is how I want to live my life, you may be able to convince people. You might start a new religion accidentally. Oops. But you might start a community. And when you're starting that community, you can't just build it. You do have to think about, what do I want here? And a lot of times that does involve collaboration because you're more likely, one, to get people on board because you don't all have to agree on everything to have enough in common to come together. But two, often when you want to build a community, you have like one thing, two things, three things in mind that you really want, and you want community. And so other people are going to influence you. And then you're going to come together and build something. If you're trying to keep a community alive, and we have to differentiate community, something large, when you talk about like the wider conservative movement versus a small, are you talking about a shul community? Right. A smaller community, I understand why you'd want to have a standard. You guys all came together for something already, whether it was 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 2 months ago. Yeah. So if you start breaking that standard, you potentially break the foundation of why you're all together. Then you have to start asking questions of why. Why are we here? What do we want? Potentially not. That's right.
Why. Some communities are built on the standard of we wanted X, Y, Z, and it's geographical. Like, we're in Chicago. We want to all head up to the North Shore. We're going to build a community there, and that might be the first step.
Well, that's why organizations rewrite mission statements all the time.
Yeah, I want to put in defense of standards because I want to defend them a little. That the standard doesn't have to be a standard of how we practice the thing, but it could even be, actually would love to couch it in the language of covenant, perhaps, that like, it's more about like shared purpose and intentional community. Some of the things I've been really blown away by are when it's actually not, we need everyone to practice and interpret halacha a certain way, or we're going to label ourselves according to this movement, but we want everyone to walk away feeling a sense of belonging. And what does that look like in our interpersonal and our welcoming and like that sort of thing.
I think this is where our Christian friends have an advantage because they're much more clear as to what they're doing and what they believe and what kind of community they're building. And I think for us, and because we're not a religion, we're a civilization, it's much more difficult and delicate to try to move the Jewish people and to motivate the Jewish people. But I will say that I think the movement that you're talking about, the conservative movement, I think it did move like molasses perhaps for many, many years, but I would say it snowballed. I don't think I think it was it was literally like a snowball, and now it's moving at lightning speed. It feels like to me, it's like it's moving into perhaps being irrelevant or changing. And I'm not saying that for the sake of belittling it, but I just think that it did move slowly, and now they're trying to move quickly.
There's so many people I can imagine in my head, and I don't even agree with all of them, but there are those people that are like, finally, they're like, we can't afford to waste time. We're losing this kind of person or that kind of person by not moving quickly. And I don't know that I buy that, but I think that might be a part of the sociological undertone of why it's moving so quickly.
Shosh.
I think like where Judaism has kind of gone wrong is this idea of like denominationalism, because it's a very Christian idea that there's like a lot of different denominations of Christianity, and you have like evangelicals that practice this way and Catholics that practice that way and Anglicans and blah blah blah. And like we're such a small community, we're an ethno religion, we really are.
But what about 2 Jews, 3 opinions?
Oh, for sure. But I think that like the reason that we've sort of pigeonholed ourselves into these denominations is because of that idea of like, oh, well, this is my thought process and like this is the right way to be a Jew. And we've alienated ourselves, and now we've created these huge divides between the movements, and there's like infighting between the movements, and we're meant to be a united people with different opinions and different ideas. The rabbis themselves, we're a religion of collaborative overlap. We're a religion that's built on argument, and we like the Talmud doesn't codify halacha. The Gaonim started codifying halacha. Like there's such a generation by generation thing that happened within the Jewish project, within the rabbinic project. And I think that, like you were saying, like with the Enlightenment, we sort of were like, okay, now we're going to make this transition of either moving into the big cities and like really assimilating into a society that isn't our civilization, like our way of being. And so how do we do that? Well, we have to create labels for ourselves. We have to say, I'm this kind of Jew, I'm that kind of Jew. And I think that in the beginning might have made sense, but I don't know that is the continued way that we should be practicing anymore. We've become this sort of like shelter for Jews who feel displaced from traditional Judaism, in like intense air quotes, because I don't necessarily think that Orthodoxy is the reflection of traditional Judaism. I think that Judaism, like traditional Judaism, is dynamic, and saying we have to get as like machmir as possible, like as stringent as possible,
For sure.
is not the best way to be a Jew. And I think there's a lot of value to having a traditionally practicing life.
People in Orthodoxy, some would say that they're the middle ground. Like the assumptions lots of different denominations make about each other and make about how each other feel about each other, it gets so messy.
And like I've met with colleagues of mine in other denominations, and I've said, it's really a shame, and I'm really outside of the whole denomination scene, but it's really a shame that we don't all come together except when there's anti-Semitism or something bad that goes on. Then all of a sudden we're all Jews. But then when there's not something bad going on, we're doing exactly what you're saying and what you're afraid of.
If we do believe that Judaism is dynamic and changing, we also believe it doesn't change in one direction. That would be impossible. Two Jews, three opinions. And so, I mean, I don't think everyone in every denomination is suddenly going to say, everybody's right for doing Judaism their own way, but to recognize there's validity, no matter what conclusion people come to, Orthodox, Reform, anywhere in the middle. I keep changing what I call myself, if I call myself anything, I don't think that's going to revive Jewish community, because community is something small. It's something specific. It's something sometimes exclusive in some ways. You can be an exclusive community. But
I would just...
it will make us happier.
Yeah.
I would modify and say you don't have to say validity. I appreciate what Chabad often does is finding the usefulness. I've heard a lot of Chabad rabbis even who appreciate Reform congregations. They have to be very delicate when they do it, but they're saying, listen, there's a place for this and this helps our people. And they certainly don't think that the Reform is valid. And I would say that the Reform doesn't think that the Chabad is necessarily valid.
I think I wanted to bring back a point that we were talking about actually offline maybe before we started. And it reminds me of a point that I heard in a podcast episode a few years ago, because I'm thinking a lot about politics and American political dynamics when I think about Jewish community dynamics, which was that the biggest divide in America is not between left and right. It's between politically engaged and politically disengaged. It's between the people who are listening to the news and chatting at each other on Twitter and the people who aren't, and who for anyone who's in the quote political class and is engaged truly has just no idea how to access, because people don't really understand how they get their news because they're not following traditional outlets, right? And there's been a lot of rise and talk about people getting their news through the platforms and the algorithms, and there's just this huge group of Americans who are disengaged from the news and from American politicking, which is part of what explains how polls in recent presidential elections have been so wrong, because they don't respond to polls in the same ways that we expect them to, and parties have polarized to an extent along those lines. But when I'm grafting that onto Jewish communities, the divide that I at least am concerned with is not between Orthodox and conservative and Reform. It's between the people who choose to come to shul, whatever kind of shul they do, and the people who are Jewish but don't care, maybe come with their parents on the high holidays, and otherwise have
not even that,
no. I know many friends who will go home for the holidays, but otherwise don't really go. And so I think, to your point about standards, Jacob, I think part of the reason why I'm reticent to get on board with that is not that I don't think there's some value in maintaining a standard of what is Judaism or what any given community should be, but I mean, I can try to get to a clearer articulation at this point, but at very least, it feels it rings to me the same way that kind of like 2020 era tone policing on Twitter just kind of alienated all the people who weren't on Twitter and don't care and are just sick of the people who are super engaged quibbling over small differences in what constitutes the right or the wrong thing to do. I'm really interested in the question of how to get people who feel alienated in any given way, and I only have access to so much of the Jewish world of the world, period, but who feel alienated in any given way, feeling that they have some purchase in the Jewish project, whether that be somebody showing up to shul who went to day school and is now totally secularized and maybe could dive back into a service, or somebody who has, one Jewish parent who is very smart secularly and who might just be interested in like picking up the Guide to the Perplexed as just a pursuit and something that they're interested in.
Interesting introduction.
Yeah, super. I mean, I'm thinking of one particular friend of mine.
Oh, that's great. That's a real thing. That did feel specific.
If you're listening, we're not talking about
is a super intelligent guy who is
definitely
love
not where
the
you
philosophy.
start. The title is misleading. If you're
It is.
perplexed, start with Parsha or something.
Start with Harold Kushner's
I'm just thinking
When
about-
Bad Things.
Yeah, when bad
honestly.
things happen.
Anyone's
to
given
good
an
people.
entry point into this thing we call Judaism that has
Could be any
a
place,
billion different outlets and possible entry points.
First of all, yes. Like, I'm actually very happy to be like the sacrificial lamb of like, I set standards and I gave everybody someone to argue with. Like, I'm thrilled because I know Avi wanted us raising our voices and I'm glad I got to be that person. But I also want to like redeem myself because of my incessant need to be liked. But no, I'm just kidding.
We
I'm
like
kidding.
you.
No, I know. Thank
We
God.
all like
Told you.
you.
No, I'm just kidding. So I knew it. But I think standards can be aspirational. They can be fluid, but also because I think like what I maybe am too focused on as like someone who's like deeply institutional and should probably be institutionalized is that I first of all I work in a congregation with like very engaged population and we have like really robust services and this and that, and so I'm often trying to engage maybe only a tier down from that, the people that are friends with engaged Jews and might well want to show up to a Shabbos dinner. And what you're speaking of reminded me of a teaching that, the verbs of redemption in, I think it's Parshat Bo, there's 4 of them, but there's really 5 of them, and that's why we have 4 glasses of wine, but a 5th sort of, it's not real, it's the Kos Eliyahu, the Elijah's cup, and they said there's 4 children, 4 sons, if you will, 4 children, but really there's 5. There's the wise and the contrary, if you will, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know how to ask a question, and the 5th kid that we don't talk about is the one that didn't even show up. Like,
at the table.
yeah, like the wicked one's annoying, but he showed up to they showed up to the table. And I like...
And we've got lots of those in every shul, by the way. All of those examples. But we don't have the one that's not there.
We don't have the one
not.
that's not there. And like it'd be so fun to like try and map the movements onto
it's
those,
the one
but
who
we
every
shouldn't.
week is like, I should check this place out, but never does it.
And so we don't-
Oh, that's a great
and so
point.
we don't
even
know
those are
about
people
that.
who are on the
Yeah.
bubble. I mean, even that's a particular.
There's like another Jew. There's
I
another.
mean, if they're not even considering... Well, I mean, who's the goal
Sure,
here?
yeah,
Are we
no,
trying to engage
you're
the
right.
people who want this, kind of, but like aren't going to put in the effort? Like, I don't mean to say we don't care about the people who have no interest, but is the goal here, are we just trying to make the Jewish people as big as possible, or is the goal here to provide meaning for the people who want it, or like kind of realize they want it and don't even, maybe don't know how to ask, or don't even know to show up?
I think it's an excellent question. I think part of it's an order of priority, but part of it touches and gets in my heartstrings because there is an idea now of the thinning of the herd, and that's really what's going on now. We're getting to the point where we want to start writing off some of our brothers and sisters, and I'm not willing to do that. What motivates me to build community and to do what I'm doing is to try to be there for every single Jewish person, and also people who aren't Jewish who feel that they need to be Jewish, and also people who aren't Jewish even who want to just support the Jewish people as non-Jews. By the way, the person who sponsored our Kiddush today isn't even Jewish.
What?
And so one of the things, that's
way.
another thing that we do at Beit Shalom is it's not only for Jewish people, we also have friends of Beit Shalom. We have Beit Shalomers and we have friends of Beit Shalom. Friends of Beit Shalom can be Jews and non-Jews. And part of the challenge, and we can look at this deeper in subsequent episodes, is the way that synagogues define themselves and the boundaries, the standards, whatever you want to call them. The whole setup, I think, needs to be re-examined, and I want to salute Chabad for really changing the paradigm big time. None of us are Chabadnikim at all, but talk about a successful movement there, and they are responding in a different way. They've changed the paradigm. So I think part of it is we got to do all of the above. You are fantastic people, and we're not solving the problem. What I really want to do is bring this discussion to the forefront of people's minds, and I hope our listeners are appreciating this and want to get deeper and deeper. And I will say, one of the episodes that we just recorded is about a young couple similar to all of you, who just got married recently, and they have a little baby.
Aww.
And I introduced them to each other, and it's talking about how instead of complaining about the statistics, I decided to become a shadchan, basically, a matchmaker. And so instead of kvetching about American Jewry and how bad they are and how unaffiliated they are and how they're all like they don't even want to find Jewish spouses, we're trying to do something about it. So I think the bottom line is, and my prayer for all of you is, where in all of your communities and in your future communities, wherever you end up down the road, and as you serving as you are right now, that you look at our brothers and sisters and do what you can to encourage them and to get them connected, and to not to be satisfied with the fact that there are people left out and that there's not a fifth child. Where is the fifth child? Bring that fifth child to the table, whether they're kvetching, whether they're praising, whether they're confused, whether they're uneducated. Let's get them to the table, and then let's move from there.
I mean, not to like start a new conversation, but I think we missed a ton of points. Like,
Let's
I think
do
the
it.
biggest thing is in, Orthodox spaces as well, but in especially non-Orthodox spaces, is the shrinking of like the young adult class of people. Like a lot of, obviously we have 4 examples of young adults who are deeply involved and members of shuls.
But we're countercultural.
But yeah, we are countercultural to a certain extent. And I think like the biggest thing is people leave shul, like if they grow up in a community, they leave shul when they go to college, and they don't necessarily rejoin until they're starting a family, and then they're like, oh yeah, and that's like going back to the returning to Judaism. But like, you leave a shul, and it's expensive to be a member of a shul.
It's part of the paradigm.
Yeah, 100%. And on top of that, the suburban shuls are really shrinking because it's so expensive to live in the suburbs. Like, those are the things that are really challenging. Like, we moved out of the cities in the 50s and 60s and created suburban communities because it was cheaper to live in the suburbs. And now it's way more expensive to live in the suburbs, but it's like, what are we going to do? Move to the middle of nowhere? There's so much that we're missing because Judaism is expensive. It's expensive to be a Jew. It's not accessible for people.
And that's part of what we're doing here. It's not expensive here at Beit Shalom. There's no price tag with it. Everybody's welcome. I don't care what day it is. The Yom Kippur, you don't have to be a Beit Shalom, or you don't have to be anyone who wants to come at any day, whether it's Shabbat, a weekday, whether it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it doesn't matter. Everybody's welcome. And people will want to and feel empowered to contribute financially. We need people to be empowered to give tzedakah, to give righteous giving to these institutions, and they're going to want to do it when it's not exclusive and when they're not paying a bill, but when they're doing it from the heart. And that's what, we got rid of that whole paradigm of dues back in 2014.
Wow. And
our budget has grown tremendously. People have responded and it changes the whole psychology of it. So I think that's really, I think you're naming it. There's a lot of problems. I would like to see every single synagogue do the same thing. And a lot of them are afraid of these shifts.
I mean, it's a scary thing. I think it's interesting. So finance is one of the barriers. I think knowledge or background can also be one of the barriers.
Just thinking you need to know.
Well, if you like go into a room and everybody's standing and sitting when they're supposed to, and you don't know if you're supposed to, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
There's
it's a big barrier.
There are a handful of barriers that are worth trying to overcome, but while also, I hope, not watering down what it means to be a part of that community. And that to me sounds like the language of standards, but perhaps it's just about making whatever approach it is accessible without being diluted. Mm-hmm. And for the fifth kid that's not in the room, that's not even showing up to be contrary or simple or what have you. Because by the way, the wise child, if they're calling themselves that, a little bit pretentious. But that fifth child that's not even in the room, I think it's worth making the base assumption, I really do believe this, that Judaism, however one defines practices or holds it, that Judaism has something to offer, and that though they may not know they want it, I'm not going to say need it for whatever, but though they may not know they want it, we shouldn't assume because they're not there that they're not interested.
Kiruv?
Yeah. Yes. Actually, exactly. Yeah. Really, it is.
And part of
we shouldn't assume that they're not into it, because I think there's a thirst in our world actually for meaningful connection and spirituality, and like in a world of rational and scientific thought, all of which I love. I mean, I love philosophy and I love the natural sciences and all of that sort of thing. But I think people also need. I think we developed this, it's like why we speak, it's why we have music, it's why we have art. Like, we need that abstract, meaning-making part of ourselves stimulated. And when you're all at if you've been to like a rock concert, I saw Fall Out Boy at Wrigley Field, and I'm thinking about that. For me, anyway.
Religious experience?
Well, for some people there, it definitely was. People singing together along to something they know, they buy into, that they love. Right?
MCR's the same way.
Yeah, and not only alternative and pop punk, right? Like, I'm sure that there was something religious happening at Woodstock, you know? But it's something religious was definitely happening at Woodstock. But like, there's when everybody's gathered and singing together, and like, look, I don't expect the random Jew on the street that hasn't been to synagogue in 20 years to like be headbanging to Unatana Tokef yet. But if we can make
don't injure yourself, people.
But if that might be familiar, if that can become familiar and become meaningful, it does kind of go hard. Unatana Tokef. I don't know. I got on a tangent, but the point is, if there was one, is that I think we shouldn't assume that because they're absent and not even particularly like dialed in or even trying, that doesn't mean there isn't something for them that we might want to share and bring them into, and we might show it to them and they might be like, huh. And then like, you know, go back on their merry way until it hits them again in the right moment. But yeah,
it's Yom Kippur all of a sudden now.
Well, that's my Yom Kippur sermon that I never have to give. Thank God. I just do the music.
We're gonna give Aleeza the last word.
Oh, nice.
Ed looked like he was about to talk.
We're gonna give Ed the last word.
But
I don't want to take it from Aleeza, but I do have.
We'll give you guys both the last.
I'll do the last word. You do the second.
The penultimate word.
Something Jacob said.
This is how you can tell folks that they're gonna have a successful marriage. Go ahead.
Something Jacob said reminded me of a concept that I learned back when I was a math teacher in high school and middle school from an online educator named Eddie Wu, who talked about the difficulty of including people at many different levels of facility in the same classroom environment. And he talked about this concept of quote, high ceiling, low floor tasks, which are things that basically are open to anybody at any level of engagement. He had some examples like coming up with a decimal approximation for a fraction that was as good as you could get it. And students could basically take it out to as many decimal places as they wanted using the different numbers based on how facile they were with these very basic concepts. In the Jewish world, one example that comes to mind to essentially self-promote, Aleeza and I have started a Mishmar series with our young adult friends in Palo Alto,
nice.
Where we have Chumashim and I make a small Parsha companion that has an outline of the Parsha, as well as some
Nice.
questions and sources. And anyone can show up, and if they've never read Torah before, they can crack open a Chumash and they can use an outline and they can read the Parsha. And if they've been reading the Torah their entire life and they have deep, rich thoughts, they can find a Chavruta and they can get into an arcane argument over a word in the text. And whatever level of engagement they're at, they can start from. And to me, this was born out of what was a felt need for myself of getting more engaged with Torah, with my peers, at whatever level I happened to be at. And it seemed that other people, I think, had a similar feeling, even who might have felt like they had different levels of facility with the text. I think more broadly, thinking kind of in sum about this discussion around standards, I'm thinking a little bit of political trends and just sort of like general American culture and the way that the sort of conservative movement's heyday in the 50s and 60s, when America broadly felt like it had this sort of sense of propulsion and momentum.
Are you talking about the Jewish conservative movement or
the Jewish conservative movement, but also
Capital C, conservative.
broadly America, as I understand it from history, felt like there was this propulsion and momentum, and we could take on anything, to today's world where it feels like there's much more scarcity. And I'm actually drawn to the example of Yosef from a few parshiot ago, where he predicts 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of scarcity. And when there is plenty and when there's a lot of energy and momentum and resources, it is the role of leaders to regulate, perhaps to put in place standards and to make sure that people are staying within the bounds of what is needed and expected of them, because it is sort of understood that they are going to go and make things happen on their own. And when we reach a time of scarcity and people don't feel that same momentum, I think it is the role of leaders in whatever space we're talking about to shift their approach to thinking about how they can meet the needs of their constituents, of their community. And instead of thinking primarily, perhaps, not at all, but not primarily about what rules we need to impose and what sort of denominations we're going to create and what our standards are going to be, just meeting people where they are, asking them what their needs are, and then trying to see how we can help them meet them.
Well said. And your Mishmar that you guys are doing, what day of the week do you do that on?
It's the first Wednesday of each month.
Oh, very nice. Kulakavad, you're building community. That's exactly. Should have told us that up front. Put your cards on the table. Aleeza.
I mean, speaking of building community, there are a lot of different ways of building community. I mean, this is a small point, but one way to get people more involved is to give them a way to be a leader. And there's so many different ways to do that. There's so many ways to get them involved, kind of like what Ed is saying. But different people have different backgrounds. So for me, I don't really know how to lead davening, but I know how to lead a community. And so someone approaching me and being like, I think you should join the board, and then just helping me through that process of joining the board and figuring out what that means really made a difference for me.
Nice.
And there are a lot of different ways to make that happen. But now that I, am involved in one community, I'm thinking about what is my Judaism to me now. And we have a friend who's starting an egalitarian minyan at Stanford, which is right near us. And she's leading in a different way, and she's trying to get other people involved. So she's trying to get people to lead davening, and she's not just going to the people who know how to sing and saying, hey, you should lead davening. She reached out to me saying, hey, do you want to lead next week or any time in the next year? And I will write you down whenever that is, and I will teach you how to do it. And so
it's a lot of work to do that kind of organization.
It's a lot of work.
That's kol hakavod to her for doing that.
And I mean, that's part of the question here, right? What do we want for ourselves? Is this a personal question of we're looking for community for ourselves? Is this a question of we're trying to build community? Is this a question of we're trying to bring people into a community that exists? And different work is required for that.
Totally.
You might have to put in a ton of work. If it's a personal endeavor, sometimes there's very little work involved. Sometimes where you live, there isn't much of a community, and you have to build, and you have to put in a lot of work. And getting other people involved in ways that they're good at is only going to help you, and it's going to make them feel involved. So she gets people to help advertise this minyan, because that's something they're good at. They're good at rallying people together. And kind of in sum, basically, when you're thinking about community and what that means to you and what that means to build, you kind of have to ask, who am I doing this for? And why? What do I want for myself? What do I want for others? What am I hoping to give versus get? Who am I hoping to bring together? Again, why? And you're gonna end up with different answers. You're gonna end up with different strategies, with different paths. And we have to be honest with ourselves. Am I looking for something spiritually meaningful for me, and then I want people to be part of that with me? Or is there something bigger I'm a part of? And sometimes you're a leader, sometimes you're a lay leader, sometimes you just want to join a community and find your way through that.
Well said. What a blessing to spend this time with all four of you. Let's go for, as we said, we just finished Sefer Bereshit. We said Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. And let's go Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek for all of us. We should go from strength to strength and be strengthened for our sake and also for the sake of Klal Yisrael. Take care, everyone.